So
Yeah.
first, it's like a recording. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for taking time out of your evening. That means a lot that you are here to learn about fashion marketing. This is one of my favorite subjects to talk about it. So I'm really excited to share my journey and really just what that means in the modern age of the fashion industry. So also thank you to the New York School of Design for the opportunity. I went to one of my first classes over a year ago. It was one of the first things I did when I moved to New York, and I couldn't have chosen a better institution. So thank you for the opportunity. So I'll start by explaining why we chose marketing because I am the CEO and founder of Von Sorella. We're based here in New York and London, and I'll go into a bit of my background in a little bit. But really to tell you why is because I started my journey over 10 years ago, whenever I first became a single parent in my early 20s. And I was like, okay, I'm going to build this fashion label. And I had no idea where to begin. Of course, I had gone to fashion school, but I didn't know how to really tell my brand story and really get it out there. So over the course of 10 years, I taught myself marketing. I did go to school for it as well. But I really wanted to learn how to deliver my brand's message to the audience, to make it land, to make impact, to become memorable. So above all, while I am a creative director, while I'm a fashion designer, I'm a storyteller. At the end of the day, I want to make impact, create emotion, and really tell my story, the brand story and the people that we empower. So that's the basis of why we chose marketing. I also feel like the things you learn in traditional courses are very technical and mechanical, whereas I like to look at marketing, again, as an emotional transaction that you have with your audience. So I'm really going to be touching a lot on that. And please don't be shy. Feel free to type in questions in the chat. Even feel free to unmute and, if you want to chip in and ask any. So I'll get started. First, I'll start with sharing a little bit about my brand. So, oops, going back. So the brand is called Von Sorella. We launched in New York about 5 years ago. My first show was at Paris Fashion Week in 2017. I was a one-woman show. I literally locked myself in my apartment for 2 weeks, made a collection, didn't sleep, and then showcased it at Paris Fashion Week. It was a great experience. I had a lot of learning to do, and that was back in 2017. And for the majority of the career that I've had as a creative director, we focus primarily on women's ready to wear, so gowns, dresses, really nice evening wear made of velvets and embroidered silks. This year, we really decided to challenge ourselves and go into new territories. So we launched our first menswear collection, and it's the image you'll see in the center and the right side. So that's called Villain. It's a unique kind of capsule collection. Everything is made in London, and it's kind of androgynous. It's actually unisex, so it's men and women's. But I've had so much fun with it, and I've gotten just really to tell the story to a lot of people and connect with a lot of people. So the brand has truly evolved over the course of its inception since 2017, so almost 6 years. And it's been a really interesting journey. And the reason why I chose Paris Fashion Week is because I was always inspired by European architecture. My grandfather lived and worked in Paris, and I just felt very connected to the city. And the reason why everything is made in London is because we're very internationally focused. I personally love London. I travel there a lot. I actually just got in last night from London, but also primarily because we're really committed to British tailoring and historical craftsmanship. So our manufacturer that made everything that you're seeing on the screen is 100% women owned and operated, and they use true British tailoring for all of their garments. So again, we're based in New York and London. We go back and forth. We do international shows. We did DC Fashion Week. We're doing London Fashion Week. We'll also do September Fashion Week, New York Fashion Week in September. So lots of events and experience-driven marketing that I'll talk about here. And just to talk about myself, why I started the label and where my background is, again, it kind of started in fashion school. I actually got a bunch of marketing jobs to support my label, and then I became really good at it and fell in love with it. And now I just merged those two worlds together, and that's really the story I'm telling today. Um, and I am based in New York. I'm from Houston, and I really run the brand remotely. We are, again, very globally focused. So we're constantly doing shows at really unique kind of venues and with unique partners, which I'll go into. And so, yeah, that really is a sum of our clothing. Now we do ready to wear. So we do have clothing that is launching on our online store. But we also are really pivoting and focusing on custom this year. So we're really reaching clients, making custom gowns and dresses, suits. We actually have a partner on Savile Row. So really exciting things there. And that's just to give some context into my background and history. So when it comes to marketing, marketing is a broad universe. It can encompass so many different things. So I like to break it down into really these categories. I won't go into every single one robustly, but I do feel like these are the most important, integral, just bones of marketing. If you really want to market a brand, if you want to work on the marketing side or social side or experience-driven side of fashion, these are the most important things that I would recommend studying, learning, experiencing, obsessing over on social media. And that way you can learn it and really learn what the opportunities are. So one is brand identity. We'll go into that, but that's really knowing who you are as a designer, who you are catering to, and really the universe that you're building. I like to describe branding as building a universe. You want someone to really walk into that universe and know where they are. You're creating a world. So I'll go into really what that means. Second is content creation. So content creation can be blogging, it can be making social posts, it can be making reels. So there's so many different facets across which you can connect with your audience. But content creation is a huge focus. So as a creative director, I'd probably spend almost half my time on this, and I'll give some examples as we go. Third is my absolute favorite. I could probably talk about that for a whole 2 hours straight, and that's experience. And I feel like that's why I called it modern marketing. I feel like in today's day and age, fashion has always been extremely competitive, but it's never been more competitive than now. And if you don't connect and resonate with your audience on an emotional and experiential level, you're not going to convert them to clients. And it's really about building an experience that's unforgettable and that beats your competitors, because at the end of the day, it is a commercialized business. You do want to make money and make a name for yourself. And four is storytelling, which I would say you can layer into everything. I'm probably going to use that word a lot. So that's really important in today's marketing as well, not just fashion, really across the board. So these are the four pillars of marketing in my experience. I definitely have favorites, and I'll go into some real life examples of each one. But really what it comes down to is that you want to create something that's compelling, something that connects with your audience and really gets your message across. So I would like to start with brand DNA. And this is really where we start to talk about who are you as a designer? What does your label represent? So I gave my brand as an example. DNA really can encompass a lot of things. It can come down to your font, as we see here. You want to stay committed and consistent across the board. So you want a particular font that visually depicts what your brand is. If like mine, I try to be kind of elegant and clean and minimalistic. Whereas if you're like a streetwear brand, you may want something that's more edgy or more animated. So you always want to start with that. Definitely like fonts, always colors. So as you see, my brand has a lot of gold, even in our imagery, like against this elevator wall on the right. I love gold. Gold and black is clearly my favorite colors to put together. And then I love like deep rose colors and golds and fuchsias and pinks. And that's just really, now every collection can vary, but when we come back to our brand and we want our brand to be recognized, we want to stick to a color palette that's recognizable. A lot of, for instance, Tiffany is like that blue, and then Lamborghini, you think of yellow, Rolex is green. So you always want, I would say pick a color that you're obsessed with and don't get tired of, because you're going to see it in a lot of things. It's going to be on your press invitations. It's going to be on your tags. It's going to be everywhere that you can imagine. So that's actually a rule of thumb for all brand marketing. I would definitely, it's kind of like getting a tattoo. You're going to have to look at it forever unless you completely rebrand, which is really expensive and it can be very challenging to do once you've established yourself. So this, what you're seeing here, the logo, the artwork, even the color palette and font, took me about like 2 or 3 years to land on. My brand again has evolved over so much time, but it really took me some time to really fall in love with what I wanted to commit to. So really here what we see is my brand depicts architecture. That's one of my biggest inspirations as a designer. So it's in my branding. I have this kind of virtual store that I have in the background of my store. And I want people to feel like they're walking into like an elegant place. I want them to feel like it's elevated, it's sophisticated, it's somewhere exclusive. That's what I want my brand to depict. My logo to the left of that looks like architecture. I asked my designer, we went through probably 15 iterations over the course of a year to land on this logo. But it's very special to me, and I think it's recognizable. One thing here is that I have very fine artwork around the side, which isn't always recommended from a branding perspective because it is a little detailed. It's a little bit harder to put on like a t-shirt or a tag, but I was really committed to it, so I chose the hard way. But some brands can be very simple and still recognizable. So again, just making sure that what you commit to is consistent and depicts your inspiration and what you want your brand to convey is really important. And then on the right, the imagery is definitely my favorite part of all. We've worked really hard over the years to find the right models, to find the right kind of tone and imagery and just emotion that we want our photography to depict. I'm very selective with photographers that I work with, and that all feeds into my brand DNA. For example, I wouldn't hire a bridal photographer for my fashion label just because they're going to capture something more, typically probably something more subtle or something more simple or something more formal. I want mine to really create emotion, to really challenge the narrative. I love putting women in men's jackets and really blurring the lines between those. So that's why you see myself and another model in a menswear jacket. I like the tattoos. So just like really interesting models and like diverse looks is really important to us. But at the end of the day, it's still consistent. It still kind of sends the same message. So I wouldn't necessarily do something where it's completely different, at least for this collection. I want it to be consistent. And again, I want someone to see it and really recognize my brand and say, okay, that's Foncerella, that's not something else. So a lot of thought goes into this. This is really what I would call building like the foundation of a home. So you want this to be strong. If your brand contradicts itself, you're not going to look like a consistent label. And a lot of my inspiration, branding is one of my favorite parts of marketing as well. Some of my inspiration comes from Aston Martin or Rolex or really like luxury brands. I didn't get my inspiration from fashion, definitely came from like luxury kind of services like that or architecture. So you can definitely pull inspiration from all kinds of companies. I've seen fashion labels pull inspiration from Apple or from, other car brands. So I would definitely see like what has made impact in your life and what kind of brands are you drawn to and use those as inspiration. Because whenever you brief designers to create this artwork, you have to give them inspiration. So I definitely recommend like I probably have 1,000 Pinterest boards just for this alone, but definitely find inspiration, find what really speaks to you and use that as kind of an inspiration for your own brand. One thing I didn't write about here too much is brand voice, and that's really your voice as a brand. So say you're on social media or you're in a press release, some brands are more formal, some are definitely more conversational. So finding your brand voice is a part of your DNA. For example, our Instagram is a little bit more formal. It doesn't really have like question marks or, just kind of like off the cuff comments. It's very straight to the point and more formal. So that is another part of brand DNA that really goes deep as well. So all of these things go into just building that foundation of what your brand is and what people will see it as and perceive it as. And ultimately, this makes them decide initially if they're going to purchase from you and if they want to go further into what your brand is and what it offers. So now I'll go into the more technical side of marketing. So I narrowed it down because there's really a lot of different channels that we could talk about here, but this is really about content creation and connecting with your audience. So the three pillars of marketing that are inbound and outbound are probably these three. So blogging is really important, even though a lot of companies mostly do it on social media, there's still a lot of opportunity to do it on your website. As you build a brand, you want people to go to your website and be able to research, what you're doing behind the scenes or who you're partnering with. And that's really important for us. We're really big on sharing, pulling the curtains back and talking about what we do. So these are just a couple examples. So on the left side, we talk about how I select fabric. So we did a photo shoot with one of my textile agents in the garment district, and I've been working with him for like 10 years. Went in and did a whole shoot, and then we talked about how I pick the fabrics and which ones go with which collections. I want my consumers and my audience to go to my website and see the whole process, and that's really important from a storytelling perspective and just from a level of authenticity. You really want to share that you're not just creating clothing, you want to show the process, you want to show what you go through. And another big part of that is photo shoots. So the second one here shows behind the scenes of a photo shoot we did. We rented a studio out in Williamsburg and hired a whole team, and that's a pretty standard photo shoot for us. But just showing how do we choreograph it? How do we light it? The AC was off and we were all dying of sweat. So things like that, I like to kind of bring to surface and show people there's a lot that goes into building this polished, elegant looking clothing. We actually work a lot behind the scenes. And I think as a consumer, that's really important because they feel like they're a part of that process. They can relate to it on some level. And they really see the humanized, the factor behind it. So I think blogging is super important. It doesn't have to be an actual typed up blog on the website. It can be a video blog, or it can be just a reel that you post on Instagram, which we do all of that as well, of course. But I'm just a fan of written content as well, because from a more technical side, it's really important to have good SEO, which means search engine optimization. So essentially, the more you talk about a topic, the higher you rank in Google, which I won't go too deep into because that's pretty technical, but that definitely helps you get searched for on the web as well. Especially you want organic traffic to your website. So these blogs help you rank higher. So if somebody was searching photo shoot New York or something, we may pop up and then they'll find our clothing and then want to follow us. So it's a really great, basically free way to get discovered and also build a story with your audience. The second one is email. So this is pretty straightforward. I'm sure everyone in here has received a billion marketing emails over the course of your life, but they actually have a really strong return on the investment. So email marketing is super important. Also, text marketing is really big right now as well. It actually has a higher open rate than email, but both are very effective for building a conversation with your audience. So we have a subscriber list. We'll send them emails about new launches, new products, new events coming up, new lines that we're launching. I'll sometimes even just email them a blog and just say, hey, this is what's going on. I hope you're doing well. And for us, that creates a narrative and it keeps us top of mind. And then if that person sees it, they may not buy something immediately from that email always, but they may think of us 2 months down the line. So the real big thing here is that one, you're making a connection with your audience, but two, you're staying top of mind, because from a commercial perspective, you want to be the first designer they think of when they need a custom suit or they need to buy something for an event. So it's so much more than just staying on social, which of course social is incredibly important. I don't think I need to tell this room how important it is, but I will say it's ever evolving. I don't go too much into influencer marketing. I've worked with it in the past. For me, it's really about connecting authentically with my audience. So we do a lot of behind the scenes reels. We're really big on showing behind the scenes and photo shoots. And then of course we post a different kind of plethora of photos. So it could be studio, it could be street, it could be us doing an interview. So we try to mix it up, which is really important and connects with our audience. My team has worked wonders creating so many photos and stories around just even one or two pieces. For example, we're launching a full 15 look collection in a couple of months, but we can't release it. So we had to be really creative with how we could kind of get people excited about it before it launches. So I think the big thing to stress here is to be really creative, to think of, and again, find inspiration. So across all of these, but especially social, when you see a brand do something really cool on social media, like screenshot it, save it, because you never know when you'll need that inspiration, and it may inspire your brand to do something similar. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here and see if anyone has questions or comments or really anything.
Hi, Priscilla. So it's Chloe. I wanted to ask something that you just kind of touched on, the staying top of mind. So how do you find that you can strike that balance between like staying top of mind versus being like, you know, an email in an inbox that somebody just goes, oh, I don't want to look at that anymore?
That's a great question. And I think it's something that marketers and brands struggle with every day. I like to really walk a fine balance between what am I delivering? What message am I giving to my consumer or audience? And how I define that is I really try to put myself in their shoes. And I think, okay, if I receive this email and I'm not looking for anything, am I going to unsubscribe or am I going to find value in it? So the more value you can bring, I think the better. And I think it really ties back to, you know, creating emotion, telling your narrative and really continuing to share some value so that when they open it, they don't feel like, wow, I'll never get that 30 seconds of my life back.
That's really funny. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Especially thinking from the perspective of like, what would you want to see in your inbox and what's actually going to engage you versus like, would I look at this email and say it's spam? Okay, yeah, I don't want to send that then.
Yeah, 100%. Are there any other questions? Okay, so I will continue. And this is another one of my favorite parts. Actually, these last two are definitely what I spend probably 80% of my time on. So I mentioned in the beginning that storytelling can be layered across everything. This is woven into everything you do as a marketer. But storytelling is a core essential for Von Sorella. And what I mean by that is we use the press and media to reach audiences. And the great thing about it is that if you're really good at it and you work really hard and you really do your research, you can have an incredible return on it's free, it's earned media. So how we do it is we think about what is the news that we have? What's interesting? What would journalists, press, and media really want to talk about that our brand is doing? For example, we launched 2 jackets ahead of the full collection going out. So that's what you'll see on this left side where it says Press Wire. We got that out to the press talking about how it's a unisex brand, how we're 100% woman owned and operated. So really finding unique parts of our story that we feel like the press would connect with. This middle one where it says New York Times, we were featured because I actually tweeted someone. So Twitter is by far one of the best platforms. I will like die on that hill. I happen to be following a New York Times writer, and she asked how people felt about dress codes in Manhattan and post-COVID. And I happened to respond to her, and she inboxed me and she's like, hey, are you available for a call? And I ended up getting featured in the New York Times talking about just the return of the dress code in Manhattan restaurants. So you really never know what could happen. This one on the right, I was featured in the Washington Post, well, the brand was, and I was making really like couture fashion masks in the beginning of the pandemic. And I was writing to all the editors where I was living in Houston at the time, and none of them would respond to me. And I just got kind of frustrated, and I found the fashion critic at large at Washington Post. I actually had a typo in the email, and I wrote to her, and she still offered an interview and featured Von Sorella in the Washington Post. And we immediately sold out of everything within 27 minutes when it was posted. I share that to say that never feel like you're limited and never feel like you are too small to, you know, speak to anyone or be featured. Press is such a powerful tool in fashion because it gets you exposure unlike anything else. That kind of exposure would have cost us probably millions, not millions, but a lot, hundreds of thousands for sure. So of course, I think an element of luck is always involved, but I think again, it's really doing your research and finding the right people that tell the story. So for example, the one for the masks, Robin Gavon, she writes really compelling fashion pieces. If you don't follow her, I highly recommend you do. Read what they're writing about, see what intrigues them and see what lands with their audience. And the more you can align your brand with that, the more likely you are to get featured. It does take a lot of emails, and there are a lot that get rejected or don't get answered, but the one or two times that you are featured really pays off and builds an audience that, for instance, Washington Post was 3 years ago now, and I still have those clients purchasing from my brand. So we've been able to create a relationship that's really great and really strong and just authentic. So and the storytelling I use from more of a press perspective here, but you can also do it on social media. This kind of goes back to like pulling that curtain back and talking about the process, talking about what goes on behind the scenes, and what's unique about your brand. So whether it's not showing behind the scenes or showing what you want to do with fashion, maybe you're driven by a certain mission or values. For instance, we're really committed to making low quantity pieces. So we don't like to over manufacture. We make as little waste as possible. Everything is hand cut according to old traditional standards. And that's part of the story we want to tell. We want people to know that we're doing that. So share that, blast it. Never like, I don't think you will feel like you're oversharing at some point, but a lot of times for someone to actually process a message, they have to be told it over 7 times. So don't feel bad if you're repeating it or writing to the same writer or trying to get that message across. I think just persistence is really key here, but also staying very genuine and true to what you want to convey. So I think that's probably number one above all, is always just stay true to what your message is and what your values are, because there were times that I was offered different interviews and I felt like, okay, I'm just going to take this just to get featured, but I don't really feel like I connect with it. And that's where, you kind of lose the value of what you're doing and it gets harder. So big thing here is I would recommend go on Twitter always, and find what your favorite brands are talking about. Like just Google their name and go to news and see where are they featured in the press. Why are they getting featured? What are they doing that's so cutting edge and different? So that could be a whole there for storytelling. And now experience, which is absolutely just so amazing. I think this is by far in 2023 and beyond going to evolve and really become the core of how brands succeed. And if they do, I feel like this will really determine if brands make it or not, especially in the competitive landscape that we're in. So when you think of fashion experience, I think 99% of people think runway show, which a runway show is amazing. Do not get me wrong. I love them. I've done them and I've gotten amazing return on my investment. I've built relationships from them, but there's so much more beyond that. And if I could stress anything in this whole course, I would say that thinking outside of the box in this sense is incredibly important. And I'll go into a couple of examples here, but just like a top line, you can do exhibitions. If you can't afford to hire 20 models, hire a venue, hire a DJ, get a whole audience and spend 20 grand on a runway show, you can rent a hotel for $500 a night at a nice place in New York. You can invite the press and social media influencers, and then you can have your own show and just have like hors d'oeuvres. So thinking really strategically is really important here. It can still get you introductions. In fact, one of my first shows was just like that. I didn't have a big budget, but I really wanted to do something during New York Fashion Week. And it turned out to be great because people that came in were actually talking with me one-on-one. I wasn't behind a stage. I wasn't like running around with my head cut off. I was actually talking to them one-on-one, and they felt very uniquely taken care of. So low cost, it can also be very impactful. Some of the biggest brands still do that. And sometimes when clients want that like one-on-one experience, they actually buy from you. We had like NFL players and their wives come in. We had people from Netflix come in, all because we posted on fashionweekonline.com. So always think outside of the box and don't always feel limited because you can't pay a huge fee for shows. Often as a designer, I'm approached to pay 20, 30 grand just to participate in like a Paris Fashion Week show. Not saying they don't have value, but you always want to think strategically and how you can really invest and get a really big return on the value. Of course, we know fashion shows. I love to think of fashion shows in like a different sense, though. I think that hosting them privately can be very beneficial, just like at a hotel or at someone's home. If you know someone that has a great rooftop and they're willing to let you use it, take advantage of that and do a small show, because it's not going to hurt. You have nothing to lose, especially as you're growing. When you're early on as a brand, it's the best time to experiment because you have nothing to lose. I mean, the worst that's going to happen is only a few people come, but now a few people know about you. And I've been at really small shows and I've actually met more people than at a big show. So never underestimate the value of something that's somewhat intimate or small. Immersive experiences, I would really, immersive experience, I would go into like, actually the example I'm about to show. And there's a few different things you can do. You can do like a photo shoot experience where people come and watch. They could, maybe come and try on your clothing. You could have like a custom fitting. So I think this is definitely evolving. We see bigger brands do it. We see more people doing interesting experiences. It could be maybe paired with like a juice and people can try the juice and try on clothes. And it's like a collaboration. I'm really big on partnerships, which I'll go into in a second. Which is really important. So that amplifies your reach and really creating something that people won't forget. So there are a lot of ways that you can go from here. The other one I would go into is trunk shows, which are pretty traditional, but I do feel like still have value. And that kind of goes back to exhibitions. So maybe if you don't have a full collection and you only have a few pieces to show, you could always do a trunk show and have people come and try it on in an intimate setting as well. So I'll kind of go into one of my favorite things that I got to do this year. And this is definitely an immersive experience. So I was showing at DC Fashion Week in February because I actually missed the cutoff for London because my team got COVID and I was like, I really want to do something. So I decided to show at DC Fashion Week, and I saw that Aston Martin had been a sponsor in the past, and they're by far my favorite brand. I'm deeply inspired by them. I love cars, which you'll see even more of. So I called the dealership literally 20 times and I was like, can I do a photo shoot there? And they kept giving me the runaround. Finally, I worked my way up to the general manager and he was like, here's their head of marketing, just talk to him. And it all worked out. We became really good friends. I actually just made a dress for his daughter, but that's a whole nother story. I say all that to say I was really persistent and I was able to bring in my team, bring in models, and create this photo shoot experience for the Aston Martin dealership. They ended up sending an email to 500 people that were their established buyers and community. We had probably like 40 people attend on a day it snowed in DC, which is pretty unusual in February, late February. And they had like cocktails and champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and they were watching a photo shoot. They had never seen a fashion shoot in real life. And at the bottom left corner, you'll see me talking with the owner and like his friends that he invited. Some of the relationships I built at that one experience, actually, I'm still working with today, and we text probably more than once a week. So again, this kind of shows how something can be smaller and more intimate and have much bigger value. Also, it just really brought my brand a lot of legitimacy working with Aston Martin, which is a global brand and very brand safe, very hard to work with in terms of building partnerships. But they were incredibly open. We did like reels and we got so much content. We still have content we haven't published from it. But it just goes to show that people are sometimes willing to work with you. And I think if you really follow what intrigues you and what interests you, I think the opportunities kind of come. So I did this because I'm deeply, deeply passionate about cars and it worked. So for you, it may be something that's completely different, but follow what you're like really interested and passionate by, and then people will see that. And I think they're more open to it. So that was one. And then actually the reason I just flew in from London last night is because I had a show in London. So this was an interesting kind of immersive experience as well. There's an event called Concours on Savile Row. It's a new event in London where they bring a lot of vintage and high performance race cars, and they're lined up on Savile Row, which is a very famous historic street in London where really tailoring was born. And actually one of my friends saw what I was doing with Aston Martin and he was like, you have to come like collaborate with us. And we had an event at a art gallery 2 days before, and what you'll see here in the bottom left corner was one of our first designs, and in top right, that's one of our first designs from a Savile Row custom tailor that was made in London. That suit retails for about £5,000. We got to sit down with one of the textiles partners on Savile Row, go through what we want more of our pieces to look like. So now we're designing a full 10-piece collection with this race company, just because they saw what we were doing with Aston Martin. So I hope this really shows that as you do things, it can snowball and lead to so much. It all started because I had to go to DC Fashion Week, and then did this photo shoot, and then did this London event. And now we have an event in France in 4 weeks. So it's really, I've been able to build and grow my network. I've made tremendous relationships through this. And also from a branding perspective, it also legitimizes my brand and really elevates the perception of it as well, just to be able to partner with such amazing brands and people more than anything. And it's we're a very relationship focused company. I'm a very relationship focused person. So I hope that that reflects in my business. But I really want people to see this, and you to see this, and really see that you can create experiences and partnerships way outside of the spectrum of fashion and still be very successful in doing that. So my biggest advice in this sense is to always like really think outside the box and think, you know, again, like what inspires you? Because people always are like, why are you working with cars? It's fashion. It's like, well, there's actually a very strong overlap with those two things. And we share a lot of the clients and a lot of the interests. So it was really great and very fun. We haven't even published it on our social channels yet, but we will. I think we're almost at time. So I'm going to give my final kind of advice when it comes to marketing. I think this is what I wish someone had told me. And I think I've learned over the last decade in marketing and in fashion as a creative director, but this honestly applies to any industry as well. So the first and foremost, which I've already said, is stay true to who you are and what your brand is. So more than anything, don't cut corners, or don't take things just because they seem like a good opportunity. Definitely follow what feels genuine and feels like is going to really stay true to your brand. That goes all the way back to what we talked about in the beginning, brand DNA. So stick to those core values and purpose, and I feel like you can't go wrong. 2 is be very patient, which is just ironic me telling anyone to be patient because I'm the most impatient person ever. But marketing does take time. So for instance, writing those blogs or even starting a new social channel, I'm sure we all know can take a lot of time to get response. But if you're consistent and you stay true to your values and purpose, you will build a better audience. And I think it'll be much better than if you were just to post randomly or kind of not stay consistent. So that's, again, like building that universal messaging and brand. 3 is, this is really hard, probably the hardest, get objective opinions, because if you're creative, which I'm sure every person in this room is, you're very emotionally tied to what you do. And this is something I struggle with every single day. I'm like, no, this is the best idea. This is the best thing. And it's not. So, always ask someone that's not emotionally tied to what you're doing. From a commercial perspective, from an audience perspective, you may think it's the best idea, but at the end of the day, it does have to land with your audience. Otherwise, you can't be successful. So ask people outside of even fashion circles or anything. It could be a family member too. Sometimes I use my best friend who's not in fashion, or one of my family members who are definitely not in fashion. So that's really important. Number 4 is definitely my favorite, have fun and take chances. All of the experiences I showed, and really everything I've showed, was because I took chances and because I really went with my gut, which I know sounds very cliche, but it really is worth it. And then number 5 is to make impact and create emotion. At the end of the day, if I'm not making someone feel like they're experiencing something different, then I feel like I haven't done my job, because that's really why I'm in fashion personally, is I really love the emotional experience of putting on something and feeling like a different person and really transforming how you feel and who you are through fashion. And your impact and purpose may be different. You may want to help certain communities or different, or maybe just convey different things or do something that has not been creatively done. So whatever that purpose is, be sure to stick with that. So I will stop there and ask if there's any questions and go from here.
All right, we have a question from Sharani Hutchins. She asks, how do you identify the problem you solve instead of just selling a product?
How do you identify the problem you solve? Do you mean like identifying the problem through marketing, I'm assuming? I can't hear, but I'm going to assume that's what she meant. I would say, oh,
Your
brand
brand
value.
values. Mhm.
I think it really comes down to understanding what it's like to have that problem. So maybe for me, it's sustainability and it's countering what's happening in fast fashion. I am just really committed to making sure that that's showcased across all of our messaging. So whether it's social or our blog or an interview I'm doing, I always want to stick to that problem. I want to stick with that pain point. So I want to talk about the unethical working conditions or how it's harming the planet or how it's disempowering independent designers, making people like everyone like us harder to do our jobs because there's fast fashion labels taking over. And that's just something very personal to me that I would speak to. I hope that answers your question, but definitely focusing on the pain points rather than this is an exquisite garment, this is handcrafted, this takes 200 hours to make. Those things are great, but those are features. So we're not going back to that core issue. I hope that answers your question. You're welcome.
Hi,
Are there any? Hey,
Priscilla.
Chris. Hi.
Such an incredible, inspiring presentation. Oh my gosh, like
Thank
you
you.
are just literally so inspiring. I guess my
Thank
question
you.
is, like you were saying, patience is super important. How long do you think it takes really to see results when you're just starting out in marketing? And yeah, how does
That's a great
patience play?
question. First, thank you for your compliments. Thank you for listening. I would say I'm going to give two sides to that answer or to that question because there can actually be two extremes. I went back to like the Washington Post when I sold out in like 30 minutes and everything was like overnight. That can happen, but also things can take years as well. I think it's really a balance. I think it's having expectations that things will take time, but ultimately will be better. But knowing that opportunity is around the corner. And I like to say that like just in life in general, but especially in fashion and marketing, I don't really believe in luck. I feel like if you're prepared and you know those opportunities can come to you at any minute, then it will and it can. So I think really knowing that there's a balance and that what you're working for will go toward that long-term goal and unfortunately having to be patient. But I think just being realistic, but always knowing that opportunity can be right there.
That's amazing. Yeah, like staying ready for the opportunity
Yeah,
is such a great point. Thank you.
always be ready. You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
So we have a question from Leah. She says, to add to that question, how long does it take to get a new social going? Best way to get it out there besides captivating content, of course.
That's a great question. And I think that's an ever-changing question. I feel like social media is constantly changing algorithms, what's prioritized. And this is going to sound like I'm a broken record, but I think it really goes back to brand values and making sure that you're conveying them as creatively and authentically as possible. So how we built some of our following, which we have, a variation across, we have great subscribers as well, is I built a really good team. I think the people that help you on your team are really important. If you're solo, I recommend collaborating with maybe a friend or getting, again, that objective advice. But I think, generally for a new brand, I would say it takes about a year to get that audience and to get visibility. But the more relationships you build, the more it can grow. Which I know this is an arbitrary answer, Leah. So I'm sorry. But I think it really varies. But I think the best way to get out there is to really collaborate with the right people. And if you do have help, to make sure that they're really committed to staying true to your brand values.
I do have one, Priscilla, if you don't
Sure.
mind.
Of course.
So when you were just like getting started out, which of the marketing tools that you had available to you did you find to be the most helpful?
That's a good question. this is gonna sound funny, but like really documentaries, like that's not really a marketing tool, but
Wow.
I used inspiration from other brands and other people as like my catapult and like my like kind of drive and fuel to want to do it. So I would like obsess over these different like documentaries. Actually, I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's the truth.
No, that's really interesting. Actually, I would not have thought that.
Yeah, I think because for me personally, social media is just like very overwhelming, and I definitely see value in it. Every brand needs social. But I think for me, I wanted to see like how people, I'm really inspired by resilience and like how people like overcome things. So and that's just in my personal life too. So I guess that fed into how my brand was built. But yeah, just even if it was like a different industry, I'm really inspired by people's resilient stories.
Well, and it kind of seemed like admiring other people's resilience kind of translated into your own in a way, which is really, really
I hope
cool.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Amazon Prime and Netflix. I like
Well, we're looking
content a
forward
lot.
to the Von Sorella Netflix documentary coming out soon.
One day. Coming to you in 2043. Thank you for the question, Chloe.
Of course.
Does anyone else have questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
So, I wanted to ask, how do I like start planning? Like, I have a few like photo shoots and whatnot, but I want to start planning toward marketing. I don't know how to start it. Like, I don't know
How to start marketing the photos from the photo shoot?
Yeah, like I know I could just post them, but I want to go about it a specific way.
Oh, that's a great question. I could do a course on that too, because I love campaign building. So I would definitely build a campaign. So what I like to do, actually, if you guys don't mind, I can show you. Is that okay, Chloe and Omar?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Okay,
please.
I think this is you guys are gonna think I'm crazy how big this is, but I
And if
think
we
that's a
even
great
go a little bit
question.
over time, I think this is all like such super helpful
Okay.
information that anyone who wants to stick around to like hear, because you should, yeah, definitely.
I just love that anyone is this interested in it. I'm like, wow, I get to show what I do. Okay, so this is what I'm going to show you is a content matrix, and that's a great question, Sam, in terms of how you roll out content. Don't judge how many tabs I have open, please. So this is for our Aston Martin DC campaign. So I mentioned we had probably over 1,000 photos and probably 200 videos, which was just insane. So my team went through and got the best content. This is an app called Lucid. It's free. I highly recommend you use it. There's several others out there. So this is really showing how we posted. So we had two types of content: editorial, which was edited, really nice, clean, ready for a magazine kind of, and then behind the scenes. And we talked about, okay, let's post a reel this day, and then March 5th, like a week later, we'll post an editorial photo. And then let's do one like a selfie of like showing behind the scenes, and then another editorial. So we have dates next to each one. And then ideally you would have captions as well. And then just showing like who's working on what dates we plan to post them. And that way, as the viewer, whenever you're looking on the social feed, you get a good variety of posts, not just the same thing over and over. If they are very similar brand images, I personally like to mix them up with other brand images. You can see here, like on our feed, we do have a variety. So we have a skyscraper shot, then we have a studio shot, then we have an elevator shot. So we have a lot of different diversity. Some brands, I noticed, they'll actually just put them all consecutive. So it's preference. But Sam, I'll definitely recommend seeing what resonates with your audience. So doing some A/B testing, meaning doing one way first, getting results, then doing another way with your next photo shoot, and comparing the results is really crucial. For us personally, this is what worked. We found that when we posted the same consecutive, it got kind of flat, unless you're posting really interesting captions. One campaign I could show that details that side of things is, this is before we actually had pictures of the clothes, like we just had sketches at the point. So we posted like mood boards. So we had like this, and then there was a poem. So you would slide and see a poem. And then the next post was a different photo, and then the rest of the poem. So it told a story throughout the whole feed, which I don't think there's a right or wrong way, but that just worked for us. But and Lucid is really good to work with. And I think this is great because your whole team can see and give feedback. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
May I ask
Anything else?
one more question? Hi, I'm
Yeah.
Sarani.
Hi.
So when you're going through the brainstorming phase of creating your next campaign, and you're creating like an aesthetic for whatever season you're going for, what's your process on from vision board all the way to putting it out there for people to purchase? Because a lot of times I
Yeah.
see how people they just explain to you how you can just make a vision board and then create sketches and then go to your manufacturer. But once you go to your manufacturer and you have your product and you can campaign it, I don't know where it goes after that.
After products, you mean? And then to
Yeah, like because you can get the hype about everything, but depending on how large your audience is, because you can put so much work into how much you're putting in, like your quality can be absolutely amazing, but if your audience is small and you don't have enough of a product, because I'm not gonna like order a bunch of
yeah.
products from my manufacturer and I don't have that much of a hype from my audience. It's like, how do I, like, you know what I'm talking about? It's hard to put
Yeah.
into words.
No, it resonates with me a lot. In fact, it's something I've only recently kind of solved for myself in the past 2 years. Before that, I was having the same issues with manufacturers that wanted 1,000 MOQ or, just insane costs, which designers don't have,
Yes.
right? So I could speak about that for a long time, but one is building really good relationships, I think, with your manufacturing, which can be difficult. I personally love to work with individuals. That's just what's worked for me. But I won't go into like picking manufacturers because that's your choice. What I would definitely do is do not necessarily pre-launch, but like pre-launch marketing. So that kind of goes back to what I was sharing on our Instagram, where we were kind of like posting like the mood, and this all launched on Halloween, my birthday. So we had this whole like story going up to Halloween, like huge announcement. But really, I personally am a big advocate of not dropping a massive collection unless you have a back order of like tons of clients, because you don't want to be in the negative. That kind of goes into the economics of a collection. But I really go back to experience. It's crazy because I have a pretty strong subscriber list. I have probably 2,000 unique visitors to my website per month. Where I got all of my sales this past collection was all through the Aston Martin experience or through the show that I did. So it really goes back to like how I meet those people and talk to them one-on-one. In fact, because of those, I also got another really cool event I'm doing in June. So it's like those honestly created more clients than all of the other things that did. And that's maybe just specific to me. Do you want me to go into any part of that more? Because I hope I'm answering your question.
No, you answered my question perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. There's a lot to unpack, but yeah, if maybe I'll do a manufacturing one next too, or just like start
That
to
would be
end
great.
finish. I think I resonate with that so strongly though, because when you start a collection, you have this like emotion and you have this drive and you have this inspiration and you have this world that you want to get out there. But every step of the process, it gets diluted and it gets completely torn down to its center core. And then at the end, it becomes a commercial transaction. It's a commodity that you're trying to sell. And then you look back at your sketches and you're like, this isn't what I had in mind.
Yes.
So
yes.
it's really difficult, but I think the better you tell the story and the better you create an experience that connects people to that story, the better. I'm still figuring it out myself. I'm no expert when it comes to, selling millions of dollars, but I do think there's a component there that is good to stick with.
It's so easy to like get all of your dreams and ideas out on paper or in a pretty mood board, but then once you actually have to make it technically, that's where everything is okay. Now everything has to be to the very touch, you know?
I
So,
would say
I
also be incredibly selective on who helps you with production and just the entire design process. I probably went through 10 or 12 manufacturers. Not like I signed them and worked with them all, but I probably consulted and did prototypes with a lot. So it was costly and it was over a lot of years. But like, I think just being really committed to not compromising, because the little bit you give them to compromise, they're going to go a mile. So be really like, you kind of have to be kind of strict on that side. But yeah, you're welcome to send me
thank
any
you.
questions after if anything comes up.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Is there anything else? Everyone?
Priscilla, it looks like we've got a question from Suwan, and I think it's a great question for anyone who's in the design field, not just in marketing. She asks, how do you keep yourself motivated on days when you're just not feeling inspired?
I'm going to give my very honest answer, but I feel
Please
like
do.
that would apply to other people. My son, I have a 9-year-old son.
Oh,
No, there's days that I am not inspired. To be honest, I actually don't force myself to like, for instance, a great example, I'm designing this capsule collection with this racing partner, and I was like strolling through London and I was like in this park, perfect setting to sketch, right? And like I could only get one out of my brain. I was like, I should be so inspired. It's gorgeous outside. I'm feeling great, whatever. And I could only get one sketch out. And you know what I did? Just shut the book and walked away. Because it's like, I don't believe in forcing inspiration. I'm really big on like mental health and just keeping yourself like motivated. I think the minute things get really stressed and forced is when you actually lose the beauty of it, which like there are days you have to work and you're not inspired. But I think that's where I go back to like my end goal and like why I do it. And that's for me, my son, for everyone, it's different. So I hope that's a good answer.
no, that's amazing because I mean, ultimately, everyone is going to have those days when they're uninspired, and maybe just accepting the
100%.
fact that, like, it's just not for me today. Inspiration might not strike me
Yeah.
today, but it will strike.
Yeah,
You
and
trust
like be
yourself
nice
be
to
creative.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I know that sounds so touchy-feely, but like be nice to yourself. Like you're not a machine, like no one is. And being a designer is an incredibly emotionally like exhausting process. Like every collection, I'm like, so like don't feel like you have to do that every day, I guess. Just give yourself like some balance.
Amazing. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, I have a few questions, if you don't mind.
Hi, Elijah.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I was wondering, how do you like ground yourself with your ideas? Because is there ever like a point where you feel like you're getting too far from where you're trying to be, and you look at your design, you're like, this isn't feasible for like the brand, or like it's not possible to achieve like realistically, or do you ever get to that point? Have you ever gotten there?
Like where I'm going is so different than like where I started, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, that actually happened with my last collection, to be honest. I think, yeah, actually we did. We probably did like 3 prototypes and I literally just looked at them and I was like, this is not it. Like this isn't, and bear in mind, I had already like invested money and selected fabrics and like all of that. But I think it goes back to like what we were talking about with Shirani, like don't compromise what you want. I think it's really important to stay like grounded in what the original idea was. I will say that with a caveat that it is a business and you don't want to go so far down a rabbit hole that won't sell, because I mean, I'm like, eventually you do want to, make revenue. So I think that's really important. One really big, strong advice I would actually give myself even a year or 6 months ago is testing and learning. If you have a really eccentric idea or something that is not mainstream, right, and that is going to take a certain level of marketing because it's incredibly niche, do a sample size, like and by that I mean do like a small capsule collection. Don't do like a 20 look piece unless you really want to. But if you're really trying to adapt and see what your audience resonates with, do like 2 or 3, do 1 and ask 20 random people or your friends' friends who will be honest with you what they think. Post it on social and take a poll. That's something like I've learned to do and will continue to evolve to learn to do.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Amazing answers, Priscilla.
Thank you.
So at that, I think we're about 5 over. So I think we'll call it here. If you have any further questions, you can feel free to reach out at info@nysd.edu and we can try and get your questions answered from Priscilla.
I'll be happy to.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We want to thank you all so very much for joining us today. I mean, I was like enthralled the whole webinar. I was just like,
Thank
oh my
you.
gosh, wait, what, really? But I would love to invite you all to join us for our next webinar as well. That's going to be in June. That's going to be by Katie Irving on June 28th at 7 p.m. as well, talking about defining fashion forecasting. But, you know, this is all about Priscilla and what she's doing. So we want to thank you again so very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'm always available. So feel free to send anything my way and I'll be happy to. And please give New York School of Design a 5-star review on Google. They really need it and it will help empower students like yourselves.
Yeah, and if you have any, interest in learning fashion design, whether it be with us or anyone else, it's definitely an excellent career path to follow, I must say. So we hope to see you. Thank you everyone so much. Have a fantastic evening. Bye.
Thank you.